Jerry Beal here, and this audio is called Cause and Effect of Human Behavior and Human Decision Making. Do you realize that human behavior and human decision making are effects? You need to realize that. So they have a cause. Human behavior and even human decision making are effects that have to have their own cause or causes. So what is the cause of human behavior and what is the cause of human decision making? And please try to get how important those two questions are. For if we knew the cause, we could apply the cause and then be on purpose with our behavior and with our decision making. So as if this presentation was only a minute or two long, here's the answer to being on purpose with your behavior and with your decision making. I'll let you know this and then expand out on it with the rest of the information. So here it is. You need to choose to carry the sense of self. I am perfectly okay just the way I was, am, and will be. You need to choose to carry the sense of self. I am perfectly okay just the way I was, am, and will be. And then attempt to drop the other ways you're carrying your senses of self. You don't want to be the good guy or the bad guy. You probably won't believe that you're okay just the way you were, are, and will be, but that's because you don't know what only a few people on earth know, and that's that what you really are can only be perfectly okay just the way you were, are, and will be. It's perfect. It's the real us that exists outside of time space. Or if that isn't the case, we sure wouldn't know about it. We don't know hardly anything about our cause self. But you are currently, and have always been currently, self-identifying with your body-oriented sense of self and senses of self. And since your unworthy sense of self has behaved badly from time to time in the past, you'll have a hard time accepting the truth about the real you, for lack of a better way of saying that. So now I'll fill in the blanks to further explain. Let me firstly tell you that your life goings-on is far, far more programmed or robotic than you'd want to believe your life goings-on are. And I'm referring to your body as the robot, like a wooden Pinocchio with strings, and your sense of self-programming as the robotic programming. At least it's that way on planet Earth in 3 dimensions. For quantum science tells us that there are around 6 trillion energy exchanges going on every second within the body's neurological system. Each and every exchange is perfectly coordinated with each and every other exchange, and A Course in Miracles, which is my main mentor, explains how all those exchanges are orchestrated by how we are holding and slightly changing our body-oriented sense of self and senses of self. Here's a wonderfully useful quote from my main mentor, where my life goings-on has proven for me explains the cause and effects of those aspects. Here's the quote. It is so useful. This quote is so useful for our society, and almost nobody knows about it. Here it is. Every decision you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value you put upon yourself. What you think you are can be very hateful. What this strange image makes you do, what this strange image makes you do can be very destructive. And yet the destruction is no more real than the image is. Here's a modified version of that quote where the content and context remain the same. Every decision you make, including behavioral decisions, stem from your sense of self. Every decision you make stem from your senses of self, and they represent the value you are consciously or unconsciously putting upon yourself. What you think you are which is obviously your senses of self or your self-images, can be very hateful, such as a sex offender. And what this strange image automatically instructs your mind to do, or more to the point, what these strange images make you do, can be very destructive, such as shooting up the movie theater in Colorado, like was the case when James Earl Holmes murdered and maimed 30 or 40 people a couple of years ago. I don't know if you knew it, but he told his psychologist that he was really afraid of acting out violently. She already knew that, and she covered herself because she reported it to the police, but he still went ahead and did it anyway. You know, he was afraid he was going to do it, and he did it. And then the last sentence, and yet the destruction is no more real than the image is, which reflects the underlying theme of A Course in Miracles, which is, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, which also means whatever real reality really is, it certainly doesn't exist in time-space, where nearly everything can be threatened and is threatened in an atmosphere or environment we think is real. I'm going to read that again to you again because it's so very important. Every decision you make, including behavioral decisions, stem from your senses of self, and they represent the value you are consciously or unconsciously putting upon yourself. What you think you are, which is obviously your senses of self or your self-images, can be very hateful, such as a sex offender. And what this strange image automatically instructs your mind to do, or more to the point, what these strange images make you do, can be very destructive, such as shooting up the movie theater in Colorado, like was the case when James Egan Holmes murdered and maimed 30 or 40 people a couple of years ago. And then the last sentence, and yet the destruction is no more real than the image is, which reflects the underlying theme of A Course in Miracles, which is, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, which also means whatever real reality really is, it certainly doesn't exist in time-space where nearly everything can be threatened. You know, where we're dust to dust, you know, in an atmosphere or environment we think is real. And so nearly everyone in the world who has taken up the polarizing categorizing of good and evil, right and wrong, moralistically, everybody who has taken that up, meaning because we're so deeply programmed to run around judging various people, various conditions, and various events in these polarizing categories, all of us have developed our own versions of the good guy in us and the bad guy in us. But we've also, developed our versions of other people's behavior that way too. Nearly everyone has both those senses of self-images to one degree or another, and so nearly everyone on earth expresses and experiences, probably most of the time, as good or acceptable, and less of the time as bad, wrong, and unworthy. But we still do both from time to time. Even the seeming most worthy people can't help but once in a while express an experience in bad guy ways, or as the bad guy in them. Mother Teresa was that way. People, she was thought of as a saint and like she could do no bad or whatever, but she had a lot of nightmarish things in her mind. I don't think she knew how to deal with her mind, and they found out about that after people thought so highly of her. But she didn't, as a Catholic, she didn't know about the cause and effect of human behavior, and so she didn't know how to be on purpose. And for our mind, these alive self-ideas, these ideas are alive. These self-ideas are alive in our mind. And so it's as though our mind forces our body to act out according to the senses of self we think we are. Boy, do I ever know that. Am I ever a testimony for that? acting out according to what my sense of self was. We can't help but express the senses of self that we think we are, because these sense of self ideas are alive in our mind. It's like our mind asks us, what role do you want to play out and express as? And the answer comes as our sense of self judgments and sense of self evaluations. In other words, our mind takes our sense of self judgments and our sense of self evaluations and then forces our body to act out that way. In other words, we don't choose our behavior directly, but we can choose our behavior indirectly by choosing the sense of self. And to be on purpose, I am perfectly okay just the way I was, am, and will be. And of course you need to believe that, and the way you believe it is to realize that your real self is the one experiencing your feelings, but it isn't the one you think you are. I'm leaving out so much I could add in here in trying to keep this information as brief as possible and still get the message across. And so I'll now use my life goings on as the example, explaining the cause and effect of human behavior and human decision making. I took the Mormon teachings and commandments way too seriously when I was too young to question where my behavior was coming from and how to be on purpose if I knew where my behavior was and is coming from. And when puberty hit for me, which was, when puberty hit for me, where I was one of the last boys in my school class to go through puberty, and when I did, and I found I was just as adequate sexually as the other guys were, I automatically started getting the urges to prove I was just as adequate as the other guys were. Prove that out. And so I started developing, even as early as 13 or 14 years old, a sexual addiction with what society calls indecent exposure. I was really pissed that I had gone into puberty late, and then there were other manliness issues that I had. And if I'd had been able to settle down and just think of the truth or whatever, follow the truth, I wouldn't have messed up my life so much. But I just was anyway. It's here. I need to point out two ideas. Number one, we gain and maintain our body-oriented sense of self and senses of self. As Charles Cooley pointed out about a century ago, we get our sense of self and senses of self by what we're believing others are believing about us. It's a very unpurposeful way of gaining such a crucial aspect in our lives, but it's the way we're doing it anyway. And number two, when someone says or thinks, "God damn it," or "God damn you," that person is not taking the name of the Lord their God in vain. Hello, folks. The word God is certainly not God's name. Where in the hell has everyone been on that very gigantic mind mistake? Where's all the religionists been on that mind mistake? For God instructed Moses, "I am," or the Hebrew equivalent of the English "I am," which is Yahweh, was the name the children of Israel were to never take in vain. And that being the case makes so much sense when we go around thinking lowly of ourselves from time to time. And some of us think lowly of ourselves all the time, which requires our mind to give us the experience of what we think we are. So again, I started developing, even as early as 13, 14 years old, a sexual addiction with what society calls indecent exposure. And that came from, believe it or not, again, this way of explaining it, taking and using the name of the Lord my God in vain. You see, I am is the governor of our lives. I am is the governor. And I'll tell you one thing, this is off script, but the Egyptians were the ones that knew how that works and everything, and that's why they were able to levitate things, and they were able to turn staffs into snakes and things like that, is because they understood how the power of I am, and that it is the governor of our lives, both individually and collectively. Which in this case is, let's see, with me it was I am, and then ... fill in the blank. That's the way it is. I am one who, fill in the blank. And mine was, I am one who is bad, wrong, and unworthy in a sexually addictive way through indecent exposure. That was a really big sense of not crucial, but very ugly sense of self in my life, and that caused so much havoc in my life. It's a long title, but that's what I thought I was, which seemed to be very hateful, such as a sex offender, and that's my label, sex offender, And what this strange image made me do, which was act out with indecent exposure, could seem and does seem very destructive. And even though the seeming destruction was no more real than the image I acquired was real, yet in our society people still believe the lie that events are causing experiences, and so nonviolent, non-forcing sex offenders are thought of as causing various mental and emotional problematic experiences to both young and old alike, when any degree of anguish and agony is coming from their own and highly problematic interpretations about various and supposed highly problematic sexual conditions and sexual events. By the way, there's only two categories for human sexual events, and that's those that where the harming of bodies is concerned, and those where the harming of bodies is not or forcing. When the care and keeping of bodies is not the issue, and when it is the issue. In other words, human sexual activities are human sexual activities, period. And they aren't wrong, bad, or evil, or any of that kind of crap which has messed up our life so much. I don't think you can understand how very ashamed I felt, even when I would visualize the girls my age in sexual ways and with sexual fantasies. I felt very guilty when my mind would wander that way, and then I would try to stop, and that would even make it worse, And the Mormon leadership's advice was, when those thoughts and ideas come up, just change your mind and start thinking about something else. Wow, what a revelation that was, huh? Came from some dumbass somewhere. That's what I call outer direction, or outer guidance. Do this, but don't do that, which is well more of a hindrance than it is a help, in light of the fact that the we who perceives, the we who experiences, and the we who feels our feelings is inner guided and inner directed, as you just heard me point out with the quote I examined a few minutes ago. Our inner direction comes from all the I ams milling around in our mind and psyche. Our inner direction comes from our senses of self, such as I am introverted, I am extroverted, I am kind or selfish, I am handsome or pretty, I am unattractive and a sort of cast-off, I am smart or not so smart, I am a clever manipulator in business and a clever manipulator in my personal life. I am slow-witted and slow in catching on to jokes or seeming serious situations. I am tall or short. I am this, that, or the other, and on and on and on. And so it is. And so it is. For with the two creative words, I am, whatever follows those two creative words, when we use them in the personal context, causes that sense of self to act out in ways that follow those two creative words. And the more and deeper we are invested in those senses of self, the more our body acts out in those ways, and as though we can't help ourselves. Boy, believe me, I know that. I've got at least two stories to tell that, oh man, I can't tell them here, but in me trying in vain to overcome that sexual addiction without using cause and effect on purpose to do so, I said, in me trying in vain to overcome that sexual addiction without using cause and effect on purpose to do so, I went to more than 60 expensive sessions with traditionally educated clinical psychologists over a 30-year period. I suffered with that sexual addiction, sometimes more pressing and sometimes less pressing. And I never got a damn bit of good in going to them to where those terrible urges stopped or even lessened. When I finally found my main mentor, A Course in Miracles, and read, "Guilt is totally insane and has no reason." That's the first quote I ever heard from A Course in Miracles. Guilt is totally insane and has no reason. And so I delved into that. I was so anxious to delve into it because I felt so guilty all my life, and I was so sick and tired of feeling guilty. So when I found that, I began to create a new, honest, and responsible psychology and therapy which I applied to myself, and which does address the cause and effect on purpose, the cause and effect of our behavior on purpose. I call this the psychology and therapy of personal honesty and personal responsibility. In a nutshell, it's where we self-identify. What it really amounts to is it doesn't matter because it can't matter. It means that you have to make something matter, or you have to make something not matter. When you think about people who are supposed to be victims of sexual predators, they don't have, nobody has any idea what's going on there. They rob the people of their own personal power to just walk away from it and say, fuck you, screw you, I'm not gonna believe this bullshit that you're giving me here. That's kind of what it is. It doesn't matter because it can't matter. It means you have to make it matter, or you have to make it not matter, and then you find out later you can't make it matter anyway. In a nutshell, it's where we self-identify as an actor who is currently using a body and currently using various I am sense of self programming to act out various roles, coming from how we are holding and slightly changing our senses of self. We automatically act out our sense of self roles, whether the good guy or the bad guy. Thus, the idea is to separate the actor from the roles we're playing out. Separate the actor from the roles we're playing out. So when our roles or scripts are playing out, and as often as we think about it, we can pull back from those good guy or bad guy roles, and as if go home for the night, guiltless of any supposed damage we think we have done, or as the roles we were playing out. It's like when the director says cut, the actor goes home and he's not prosecuted for being the bad guy. Social Evolution Institution is designed to collect people who claim to love the truth so we can meet together to keep talking about and extending all the ideas of the one who went home for the night to rest from the bad guy roles, and the good guy roles for that matter. We will find that we don't want to be self-identified either way as the bad guy or the good guy, but that we're perfectly okay just the way we were, are, and will be. Social Evolution Institution will especially serve me because I've spent and wasted so much of my life in feeling guilty and ashamed of myself. And with Social Evolution Institution, we'll be extending right-minded thinking, as in correct-minded thinking, into our minds and hopefully throughout the world. Thus, I'll feel so relieved to be associating with others, where a big part of our goal is to cast off guilt by using human truth or right-minded thinking to do so. And I'll feel the wonderful company of our unconditionally accepting group of people, where, when we judge, we'll pull back and declare we made a little mistake by judging anything at all, certainly including each other's behavior or decision-making. My favorite quote in A Course in Miracles is, this is a beautiful quote, "What could you not accept if you only knew that everything that happens, past, present, or yet to come, is gently planned by one whose whole purpose is your good. Isn't that beautiful? Again, what could you not accept? See, that's the point, is to accept things as they are so that you don't have conflict. What could you not accept if you only knew that everything that happens, past, present, or yet to come, is gently planned by one whose whole purpose is your good? And by the way, it isn't, we think about God the Father, but it, in the sense, I'm not religious, but but the way, I better not start into that. It's the Holy Spirit, spelled W-H-O-L-E, who is the God of this world. You could say it that way. It's the Spirit of the wholeness. And it moves in one way, in its own way, and all of us are aspects of self sense. Well, the aspect that we really are is the actor in the role, and so it's what you could call the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit of the wholeness, is moving certain ways, and it makes us believe. Are we choosing things, or the choices being made for us? And that's another reason we want to be accepting. Just accept that comes along. And of course, you want to not accept violent behavior and that kind of thing, except after the fact. Acceptance is the key to happiness and the key to exiting a conflicted and confused society of people. Simply like a person who would gently pull himself out of a pool of quicksand, instead of getting all dramatic and excited and fighting and struggling against it, to where he's swallowed up by it. That's the way quicksand works. If you struggle against it, it just swallows you right up. So finally, I am perfectly okay just the way I was, am, and will be, is the way both we and our children accept the truth about us and reject the role-playing, body-oriented senses of self that we've been so invested in up to this point. Parents would be so benefited by parenting that way, such as, I like you and I love you just the way you were, are, and will be, which causes a child to grow up as though shoving both the good guy roles and the bad guy roles aside, to finally start exiting such an unworthy world that where we're struggling with now. Of course, the parent needs to teach the child to obey the legal laws and to behave within certain parameters, but certainly not to met out various manipulations and punishments when children don't meet expectations of their parents. And that ought to give us a reason to not hold expectations. It's that's why children don't accept their parents, is because there's so much of this holding expectations and then anger and drama and all that shit that follows. And that's only one step forward and two steps backwards, all that outer direction. So finally, and in using cause and effect on purpose in our lives, we understand it is our real self that is feeling our feelings, but those feelings are coming from the various body-oriented sense of self and senses of self that are milling around in our mind and psyche. So again, we can be on, we experience our behavior once removed from it by choosing to be okay just the way we are. Will bring that kind of behavior about. Thus, to be on purpose in our lives, to help our children be on purpose in their lives, they need to realize the truth, that the we who perceives and the we who experiences is perfectly okay, just the way we were, are, and will be. Thus we self-identify that way and free our mind of all the bad guy roles and even selfish guy roles that seem to sneak up on us and take our agency away. By believing the truth about the real us, I am perfectly okay, just the way I was, am, and will be, which causes behavior that people deem is perfectly okay. So thanks a lot for listening to this audio.